second line of Beis, even though we already answered this. And the specific point we're discussing right now is that the higher the oil is, in order to facilitate its descent into the world, it has to go into a lower, on a lower level.
Sorry, one more time. To facilitate its descent
into the world, it has to be, it comes in lower kalim, so to speak.
How did we get to this from the discussion of Hashpah, Ruchnis, and Gufnis?
That's exactly it. Hashpah Gufnis has a much higher oil, that's an etzem. So how come it comes in Gufnis?
Okay, so this is actually the continuation of that.
Right. Like in our discussion of Oyer Choizer. Like we said in the initial muscle for Oyer Choizer, you throw a ball in a certain direction. You pitch it. It's very precise. When it hits a wall and it reverberates, it's without aim. It's just a blunt throw, a blunt power, which is a much lower level than a focused and an aimed throw.
But to clarify one thing you said about the etzem is not an or, though, right? I mean, we said
The etzem is not
it's a high Indian, the words.
That's right, but the similar Indian, even out oil, everything that's higher, in order to facilitate its descent, it has to have a lower kalim.
Gashmis is the lowest kalim of them all. In other words, to be
right.
Kalim, is pure Gashmis.
That's right.
No message.
So this, picking up Yehuda's point, this Devar Gashmi is not the kalim, but etzem.
Okay, I understand your question. I'd like you to elaborate. You to elaborate on your question.
Okay.
So I don't understand.
Huh?
I didn't understand the question.
Okay.
No, we started off asking, you made the inquiry, are we talking about or are we talking about etzem that's descending? And so Rabbi Paltiel said, so or is similar in that it as it goes in his Taushul, that it goes into more and more lower kalim. So it made me think that the Hashpah Gashmi, we say it's in the Devar Gashmi, but maybe it's not. If it's different from a or and a keli, so maybe the Devar Gashmi is not a keli; it's something else than a keli, or doesn't interact with etzem like like or would interact with keli.
How do you like that?
Is it something like a wholly different thing? You know, like not. Yeah.
Well, from one perspective, I understand where you're coming from, It would seem correct. On the other hand, Keli and Oir are always Shulei B'Yerech. You present some water in a cup. Does the cup become water? Does the cup relate to water? A keli is a means by which you can grasp something in the worldly context that is really not water, that cannot be grasped. That's what a keli is. But you're right. I mean, it's a very fine point that you made. For example, the most classic example of Oiv Keli is a Nefesh and Guf. Nefesh is mislabish in the Guf, as we always point out. And the Guf comes to life. Does the Guf itself appreciate life? There is sensitivity in the Guf, but the sensitivity is still the nefesh sensitivity. All sensitivities are sensed in the brain where there is pure nefesh. There are examples, for instance, there is in very, very unusual cases, through very profound avodah, where the guf is so purified, where the guf becomes like the nefesh. Where the guf itself is not capable of doing anything that is inappropriate, that is not suitable for the nefesh. The classic example of that is Eliyahu Hanavi. Eliyahu Hanavi, Olo Hashomayim with the guf. He went to Gan Eden together with his guf. But normally the guf is not a keli in the sense that you were saying, a keli where it becomes like the oil. So in a certain sense, I get the point that you made that we congratulate for it, but in truth is in a general sense, yes, it is a keli. And what is a keli? This is a means by which you transmit this. And it's very telling, if we reflect on this question, and what we are saying is, when you speak on seichel, we're presenting the seichel in a logical and a well-described manner. And we get distracted by the logic, losing sight of the seichel, of the oyer. The classic example, 1 on 1 is 2. 1 on 1 is 2 once. That's only a keli. That's not the real thing. That's not the message. That's not a seichel. But to do this keli, you have to sense the oil behind it. And that never becomes part of the keli. Okay?
That's the chachma, the sense of oil, that's the chachma.
Whatever it's called. Okay. All right, so we're on the second line on AyinBase. So we said that we have the example where we say that the higher the oil, the lower it descends. As the example of the Chayes HaKodesh. We have the Aryeh and we have the Shoyer. Aryeh Aryeh is min hayamin. Aryeh is chesed, which is a much higher madrege than gvura. And then when the Aryeh comes down into the world and comes down in the higher treifa, tmeya, and terefes, a destructive animal. Whereas the shoyer is a kosher animal, and the shoyer can be brought on the mizbeach. That is a special madrege in kashrus, because there are only 3 animals that are eligible for the mizbeach: the goat, the sheep, and the shoyer. Other kosher animals are not eligible for the mizbeach. You can't put a deer on the mizbeach as a kosher animal. A dove is a bird. No, you can't. Only these three species are permitted on mizbeach. So therefore, this is a special status for the shoyer. Even though its root madrege is below that of the Aryeh, and emes, and the truth is that he had a sense that in fact one is the cause for the other. The Aryeh shehu Aryeh goveya b'madrege l'maylo, because of the Aryeh is at a high madrege l'maylo. Efshar, thus it is impossible sheyavoy that it should come down. Afil or alidei riba revoves. Even if it goes through a huge multitude of Shtalshalos. Shtalshalos means chaining down, descending from Madrege to Madrege. Riba Revovis means tens of thousands times of thousands of thousands. A huge number of descending steps. Yet it is impossible that through all these processes, that from that should result a chayot, a kosher chayot. And we explained this morning. Here's the point to understand. Chayot tehera means that it is in the world and it is a chaya and it is able to relate to world. It's impossible for the oyer that's vested, represented in the Aryeh, to relate to world, to the physical world. Therefore, it cannot be a chayot here. A chayot tehera, let's examine this briefly, just an interesting image to examine, to recognize. A shoyer, an ox, a very amicable animal, accepting, so to speak, the nature of the world. It's not even what is called carnivorous. It doesn't even eat living stuff. It eats grass in a very peaceful way. Why? Because it feels comfortable in the world. It does not regard another animal as its a threat, as it cannot tolerate. It can tolerate everything in the world. What's funny?
No, it seems funny to me.
Why?
Why?
It's geschmack.
Yeah, it's a nice explanation.
Yeah. Aryeh, on the other hand, no, just one. I thought you misunderstand. But you Aryeh, on the other hand, Aryeh, he can't relate to his physical world. Anything that he sees, he's ready to tear it up. I was once in the zoo, and the zookeeper who feeds the lions. And as soon as he comes, he goes to their feeding house, whatever it's called. They all turn around and they all say, it's a big zoo. In Grand Zoo, they actually roam the field normally. And they see him, they all run towards this house, towards the feeding house. The feeding house is built, of course, in two chambers. He brings in the food, and then there's a wall, and then he walks out and pulls the wall out, and they are able to access it. So I asked him, what would happen? You are so familiar to them. Would they be able to stand in your presence without harming you? He says, absolutely not. No chance of that. In an instant.
On the other hand, right. On the other hand, the Arya is, I mean, we even use it as a name. It's from a very high, it's indicative of something royal.
Of course.
We don't call people short.
We don't give names sure, right?
Right.
We don't give names sure. All right.
Interesting.
Begam zeh, and even that, when it comes down in a chayat reiv, it meyo, it hatoyriv. B'derech nefilu shvira. It does not come from aryeh b'derech hishtalshlus, in a normal process of descent. But actually there is a shvira, where the oil, there is a break, and it breaks down and it falls down into the lower madrega. The principle of a break, I would like to discuss also a little bit here from a human perspective. We always point out that you see a human being in a very low and depraved state, and you still recognize, hey, but this is inherently, in essence, a human being. He cannot lose his essential reality. How did he descend to this lowly level? How does a human being descend to this lowly level? So you would say, okay, there were one thing but another through a whole Seder Hishtalshelus. Exposed days and days. The truth is, all Seder Hishtalshelus would not bring a human being to a totally depraved and human state. What happens is, what's called a shvira. A person has a breakdown, spiritual breakdown, not a nervous breakdown, he has a spiritual breakdown. Huh? Shvira, huh?
Yeah, it's a break.
This is called, shvira means a break. It's a breakdown, it's not a gradual descent. Through a gradual descent, he can never lose contact with his original state of being a human being. It's a break. And the break in the human arena is very, very, very important to understand. The break is, there are two processes in the human mind. One is, he is being pulled down, and he has to, and he can't resist it. So he's pulled down. He doesn't resist it. He slips further and further. With this slippage, he will always remain conscious that he belongs up there, but he is slipping, and he is giving in. That will never bring him to a destructive, to a total depraved state. It is when he gives up to the point where he actually turns around and says, I want to go there. I want to go there. God forbid. He is not being pulled down, so to speak, against his will, but he is incapable of resisting. When he becomes when he turns around and he begins to seek this impurity, that's when he can lose his human respect, stature. Essentially, this is the state, there are many different madrigas, this is the state of addiction. Where a person defines his life in these terms. This is me. Rebbe is always eaten from such a state, and to rise from that is.
How does it get from here to there?
How
does it get to that point?
Well, it's hard to say. It's generally speaking, this is so to speak, a character trait.
I mean, it's how in the Indian, the nefila, there has to be a shvira. The matzah that he can't go to the Seder Vadroga is the bottom. But we just pointed to a step from which it makes sense.
Doesn't make sense. It's not a human decision. It is when he intentionally, knowingly abandons his human stature.
But isn't that is right there? That's it? That's the that's.
Even that is a conscious decision on his part, and it can be undone. It's much more difficult.
That's still on the level of nefila.
This is what's called the shvira.
That's the shvira. That decision to seek out that's the shvira.
To focus on to redefine himself in that way. That's a shvira. I was talking to a gentleman who is never caught up in these things, in Mullah Islam, should not know it, and I was talking to him, I was trying to help him, and then I wanted to, to see what is that. Is he really addicted, or is he just a Paltiel? Which is, it's possible. So I was asking all kinds of questions, and then finally I pointed and said, tell me, when you were involved in this, do you give yourself any kind of justification? Are you seeking for some kind of a rationale? Or are you just into it? He says, I'm 100% into it. Doesn't bother me a bit. You have to have help. This is mamash and nefila. This is called a shvira.
Because he doesn't have to make an excuse for himself.
Doesn't have to make an excuse of that. This is mamash and shvira. This is the breakdown of the human stature. No one should ever know it, and okay, let's continue. And similar as we find in koichas hanefesh, in the faculties of the nefesh, beriya ushmiya, sight and hearing. The koyach horiya lemailo mikeach hashmiya. The koyach of re'iyah sight is a higher koyach, and we all know that's a much higher koyach than shmiyah. than hearing. As the saying is, actually, halacha in Gemara, hearing cannot be compared to sight. In other words, it is not just different, but it cannot be even compared. It's not comparable. Re'iyah and shmiyah. And yet still, shmiyah toifes as hakoil. Shmiyah grasps and relates to a sound, shehu davar ruchni, which is a spiritual aspect. Or re'iyah toifes davar gashmi. And in re'iyah, what do you see? You see a davar gashmi. You can't see a coil, a sound. You see a davar gashmi. Ubiriyah gufa, and then within the category of Riyah itself, ein ha'adam raya mitay halavon shebe'ayin ela mehashocha shebe'ayin. Sight, the actual koyach of Riyah in the eye. In the eye itself there are several sections. There is the white section and there is the black section. The sight itself is from the black section. In other words, it descends to the lowest level. Here again, since we discussed the other, might as well discuss this also. And the Ayin Shmi is extremely important for us to sense and to relate to. What does Shmi relate to? What does an Ayin relate to? Shmiya, yes, there's a koil, and there's spiritual, a ruchnisike thing, and a ruchnisike thing, a koil, has always some kind of a form. The loudness and the purity and what type of, how does it present itself? That's a shmi. You hear the coil, you hear the message in the coil. Whereas the Re'iyah relates directly to the Gashmi itself. You see it because it's Gashmi. As we say all the time, you pay attention to it because of its form. But why do you see it? Because it's Gashmi. The same is you also find in Torah. The Malachim bikshu Torah v'lito lahem. The Malachim asked for the Torah and it was not given to them. So the whole discussion that Gemara brings down, Moshe Rabbeinu was challenged to debate the Malachim in their demand. Moshe Rabbeinu started pointing Malachim, do you have a Yetzer Hara? Did you go to Mitzrayim? And all of these things. Okay. But is it not that Bikshu Torah beruchnis? They asked for the Torah in ruchnis. They are ruchnistic creatures. And they wanted the ruchnis aspect of Torah. And the ruchnis aspect of Torah does apply to them. So how can you say, when Moshe Rabbeinu says, Torah doesn't even apply to you, you don't have a Yetzer Hara. But there's a ruchnis aspect of Torah. Bikshu Torah beruchnis. Ach, zehu. Except the principle that the Malachim do not belong with, Torah doesn't belong to the Malachim. The principle it is due to the fact that the true principle of Torah, the true presence of Torah, the truth of Torah, it's impossible for it to come in Ruchnis. Torah can only come down, the true aspect of Torah can only come down in halachas gashmiyim. In gashmiike decrees, principles. V'zehu gamkein, and thus this point explains also Mashahei Shivlahem, what Moshe Rabbeinu responded to them, Klum Yetzer Hara Yesh Bahem. Do you have Yetzer Hara? V'hainu, which means to say, the Yois, the Hisgal, was Amitis Oir HaTeira Hu Dafka, being that the presentation of the true Oir HaTeira is only Ale De Birur HaYetzer Hara. How can you reveal the true Oir HaTeira only Ale De Birur Yetzer Hara? Only by confronting and breaking through the Yetzer Hara. The Yis in Ha'oir, because the supremacy of the Oir, who min ha'choshech dafka, comes only from the choshech. Dafka. Dafka means that's the only way you can get the true supremacy of Oir when you draw it after the choshech. So we'll stop here for a moment because of the significance of this. He's saying that Torah, the true Amitis in Torah, expresses itself in halachas. As it says, the halachas are called Kisro Shel Torah, called the Keser of Torah, the crown of Torah. A similar question. Halachas are very simple, so to speak, dry statements of yes and no, right and wrong, good and bad. Do it and don't do it. So what does it mean that these halachas, this is where the true amitis in Torah is reflected. We already had a chance to learn about Torah being Shashui HaMelech. I'm looking for the simplest and direct approach because we have many aspects in our discussions that will help us understand this, not only understand it but to relate to it and see the greatness of this. Starting from the human being himself. He said, a human being, the first impression that you get from a human being, you don't know what's going in his head, you don't know what's going in his heart. You don't know what talent he has. One thing you see right away. he stands up erect. He stands up on 2 feet. In order to stand up on 2 feet, what is necessary? What keeps him standing up? Not fall down on all fours. And it so happens just today I was reflecting to me, always working, that as long as a human being can stand on 2 feet, he has seichel and you can somehow get down to his seichel. You may fail, but definitely there is a seichel there to which you can get. Because standing up on 2 feet is a very profound statement. It's a statement that says, I am an atzmi. I'm not dependent on the earth to support me. I'm not dependent on anything.
Trying to be down close for our class. You were trying.
Right?
The two people standing.
Oh, yeah.
Finding.
And he's standing up.
No.
What? No?
No, I was. Forget it. I
Oh.
was thinking like you were reflecting on how, inspiring yourself to continue to teach the class.
I don't buy that. This is such a simple thing. In other words, it doesn't have any message. Any music message. This is the way he's structured. This standing on 2 feet is putting him in a position where he is independent of everything else. He doesn't have the message. Halacha is similar. Halacha means do and don't. Independent of anything else. You don't need the reason. You don't need the insight. The sense of it, the ruchni is the emotional, the intellectual, nothing. There's a do and don't. Let us examine the human being, and from this will lead us to understand what the halacha is. Where is the human being? Yes, he is like independent, he has a presence. But he's in a big world. What does it mean you're independent? You can't be independent. You have to be part of the world. What then is this message that he's independent? No. He's not independent of the reality of the world. He relates to the reality of the world. The reality of the world is higher than the world. The reality of the world is the reality of God. It's higher than the world. That's why he's independent of the world. Because he relates to that reality. If not for the God, for his conception of God, he couldn't tolerate living in the world for one moment. Give him all the grass in the world, give him everything. What? He can't relate. This is not life. Rambam says there's a halacha. The halacha is, if somebody kills b'shoyig, you know the halacha, somebody kills b'shoyig, he has to go in exile. In order mikot. And there's halachas about this. The Torah expresses it that Talmid Shegola, a Talmid, a student in Yeshiva, who Rahman had this terrible thing occur. He has to now go to exile. His Rab has to go with him, has to follow him. Why? But the Rab didn't do anything. Because the Torah says that he has to go over there. I don't remember the exact time, if I would take some time, remember the words, that he has to be and he will live there. He has to live there in the Orim Miklat. Living, the Rambam says, living for a human being without Torah, without Chochmah is not life. The human being stands, because he stands independent of reality, independent of worldliness, because he recognizes in the world a something which is higher than world. Why is world worth living? This is what you said before. You said right this morning and yesterday. What is the greatest gift that a person gets at birth? The will to live. What's the will to live? Not the will to eat ice cream. The will, in other words, the recognition that there is a reality in life. Mm-hmm. What is so real about life? So for this we have this moshel of the host and the guest. Everybody knows this moshel by now, I'm sure. The host and the guest. Even though the guest was invited for a certain occasion, come have dinner with us. The real significance of that invitation is not the dinner. Is be with me. Just like we say all the time, what's a house? What's a home? A home is a home, the floor, the ceiling, the windows, the table, the food. What's a home? A home is the human being that lives there. That's a home. When you enter in somebody's home, you are walking on his domain, on his reality. That's what a home is. This is the human being. Human being is walking in the reality of the Creator. A reality of, that's the domain he's living, not the earth or the seas. This is what halacha represents. Halacha represents that there is a royal truth in the world, not just a functional truth. A royal truth. This is how it is, and not another way. The Rebbe explains some points about this, about David HaMelech and so forth, that David HaMelech reflected on the profundity of halacha of Torah. And reflected that in the smallest detail in halacha, the entire reality of the world depends. It says that when you bring a korban and you have the fattest ox, which is the highest level of a korban is an ox, a pork. A Kohen Gadol brings a pot. Yom Kippur will bring a pot. And he did everything right, except when he collected the blood, he collected the blood in his left hand rather than his right hand. And then afterwards he took the blood and transferred it in the right hand and did all the hazoyas with the right hand. And the whole korban is possible. And all the effects of the korban have been cancelled. This was a royal reality. It's not a function of reality. Come on, give me some food. What's the difference? I serve it to you this way. In the world, that's making a difference. L'habdil, in the world, the cat also eats. And you look at he eats, the cat eats, and the human being eats. What's the difference? It's a difference of a categorical difference. It's not a difference. It's a categorical difference. The human eating and the cat's eating is not. There's no relationship between them whatsoever. But we said many times, the human being makes a brach, which means he eats from God's hand. He doesn't eat from the world. It's a different food.
The person's recognition of the source of the world and the Eibishter, that enables him to be in the world, to basically, like you said in the beginning, to fit into the world?
No, he doesn't fit in. He stands up. He's a presence in the world. He's not a fitting. He's a presence. He acts within it and is able to affect it and to be mevared. He's not a fit-in. Like we said before, that from the etzem is ha'or is oil nimtzo mimenu. He doesn't belong with oil. It's nimtzo mimenu. He's a presence here.
Saying even the ore is a descent?
Right?
What are you saying? The ore is nimtzo mimenu, it's even the ore is a descent?
No, for etzem I say. Nimtzo. It's not
Yeah.
hamshoch. It's not hamshoch. We discussed a whole lot.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so this is the phenomenon of halachas. The etzem of Torah is expressed in halacha rather than in all the surahs. Why? Because Torah, this is primarily not how it fits into the world, how it makes sense in the world. The highest level of Torah, this is the Meibesh's Torah. Torah, as we point out many times, okay, here we come to the crux of our discussion. Torah exists only in the godly presence. Not only that it comes from Hashem. It exists only in the presence of God. That's what halacha is.
Why is this synonymous with Or Min HaChoshech? It has to be Dafka Birurim. It has to be a Yetzer Hara.
In order to reveal this principle, because this principle has no oil. Doesn't make sense in the world. Doesn't make sense. And we say, okay, here's how you put on tefillin. Here's how you put on tefillin. Just with this action you put on tefillin. Not by making sense of it, by understanding, by doing this action, how you put on tefillin. This oil that surfaces from that statement. But this is how you put on tefillin. This oil is Yisrael oil. This is called the supremacy of oil. And that comes in Achoshech. Achoshech means when there is just this simple action of simple action in the world, physical action. Remember we said, this is too long of a discussion, just want to mention this. I mentioned the other day that a human being, by virtue of what he is, symbolically standing up on 2 feet, a human being, when he encounters anything in the dark, he is looking for the oil in it. What does it look like? The animal in the light, what is he looking for? How does it feel? The animal in light encounters everything by touch. The human being in dark encounters it by sight. That's the oil or the ear.
This is the same meaning as Klum Yetzirah?
Yes, this is by Bir HaYetzer Hara. How do you mevar Yetzer Hara? Yetzer Hara knows only of world.
Well, what is the connection here with the Aryeh and the higher having to come to the lower?
Yeah, one second. Bir Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara very briefly. Yetzer Hara means that which presents existence and a tzura, a form, a view from a Ra perspective. What's the Ra perspective? Okay. I hope it'll take a minute, okay? The Ra perspective is this. Like that's like by the Aryeh, like the lion. The Ra perspective is anything that is not me is against me. Anything that doesn't support me, that doesn't serve me, what is it doing here? This is my enemy. The whole world is my enemy. That's a Yetzer Hara. And in order for me to feel comfortable in the world, I have to conquer everything that is not me. This is Yetzer Hara. Birur HaYetzer Hara is putting Yetzer Hara in place. Stay where you are. You have whatever the Rebbe gave you. That's all you need. That's all you need. Like we said the other day, you can't put the watch and the cup in the same place. From the worldly perspective, from the Yetzer Hara perspective, the reason you cannot is because the cup doesn't allow the watch to be there. It rejects it, doesn't allow, come on, get out of here. From the Yetzer Tov perspective, the watch doesn't want to go there. I have my own place. I'm not looking to displace anything else. I'm satisfied where I am. There's no conflict. The whole world is structured, the whole world view is structured on conflict.
The Yetzer Tov from perspective, I mean, that's the Torah perspective.
Yes.
So why do you say that the Malachim cannot have the Torah? Because they have the Torah.
They can have the Torah, but not the essence of Torah. The essence of Torah is to break through the Ra. This is all apis seichel. That's not the Torah. The Torah is the essential truth that can be mevarer even the opposition. Okay, this is... Okay, Baruch, the answer to your question, I mean, it's straightforward. This is the pshat that the higher goes down lower. The highest inyan in Torah is expressing what? In the lowest expression, which is halacha. And halacha has to deal with the Yetzer Hara. It's interesting. Halacha, by definition, has to do with Yetzer.
Did we have an explanation of this principle that the highest light has to come into the lowest kalim?
We had a whole discussion today, Baruch.
In class this morning?
This evening. The marshal from the Aryeh, the lion. He cannot relate to the world. He cannot relate to the world. It's interesting, as I'm talking and reflecting, that the truth is every halacha has to do with Yetzer Hara. You want to drink a glass of water. Wait a second. Make a bracha first. But I want to drink it. No, hold off a minute. Make a bracha. That has to do with the Yetzer. That's already the Yetzer Hara playing in it. The Yetzer Hara says, I want to drink the water. And you tell him, don't drink the water. Drink the water that the Rebbe allows you to drink. It's already a different statement. Okay, I took time on this because of the significance of this. That way do you see the supremacy of Oyer? It is only when it comes from Choshech. And as we said, there's a similar this. I'm not going to go into this very far, but just to point out that this is in fact the similar inyan of Oyer Choser. Oyer Choser is reflected, is revealed by abstraction. Choser. Yeah.
You know, when you pointed out, like, the view that when a person goes to drink water, he's not just, taking it because it's there, but he's taking it because it's being provided for him, and it's the Eivsher that's giving to him. So that sounds like the regular view of a Seichel person. This is the way he approaches life. He feels comfortable in the world. He feels that he is being provided for, that he fits. Not the world is being provided. Not the world is being provided. The Eivsher is providing.
That's not a worldly provision.
No, but my point is, what does that have to do with the Yetzer Hara? In other words, he's coming straight. He sees the world as he's the owner of the world.
No. Think of what you're saying.
Yeah.
Think what you're saying. Yetzer Hara says, don't interfere. I want to get my water. My water, that's here in this cup, in this world. I don't need anybody's permission to drink water.
No, I'm saying, when you're explaining to us these inyanim, it's not like just this is like a person straight comes to it and like, it's only because, whatever, it's really to counteract the natural or the initial tendency of
yeah.
Okay, I'm just kind of putting it in context. In other words, I guess the way I've understood it is like, look, if a person grew up properly and in a seichelic environment, He approaches life, this is like a straight way. He just...
No. A straight way is nicht a straight way. The ability of the person, and you said all the time, what's seichel? Seichel is that you stop before you do something.
That's or menachos.
That's all menachos. Everything you do is a choice on. We said that when a human being walks from point A to point B, think of it, a dog runs from point A to point B. A dog runs because it has only one path to follow. A human being has the entire sphere. It's not following, and he chooses this path. He just creates this path for himself. It's a completely different entity. The other state, my welcome today, but I had to get this out. Baruch Hashem, this is it. I've never been here.
From this it sounds like Tapas for raising children and losing my time. That the Tapas would be...
Just one second. Okay, have a good evening. We are, till tomorrow morning, we are interrupting.
The Tapas would be not...